Good afternoon, everyone. How you doing today? Everybody good? Good. How was that lunch? Was good? Yeah? No? How was the dessert of the lunch? Good?
It's rarely good.
I bet. So my name is Santos Martinez. I'm a Premier Field Engineer from Microsoft. So I focus in System Center Configuration Manager and databases. And with me is Brett.
I am Brett Bennett, Senior PFE from Dallas, Texas. Thanks for attending our session.
All right, great. So we'll kick here and we'll start talking about implementing Security Compliance Manager for compliance in System Center 2012 Configuration Manager. So the agenda that we're going to cover today will be overviewing what it is compliance settings in System Center 2012 and how Security Compliance Manager can integrate each other. What is the integration done and how this integration can happen between both products and how Security Compliance Manager will bring some additional options and features to Configuration Manager. We'll discuss how this integration works, and we're going to talk about how the installation of SCM happened, and then we're going to go some demos, and we hope you guys enjoy all our sessions. At the end of the session, we'll have some QA, and there's Microsoft on both sides. So feel free to do that after we finish some of the demos on our lab on the session.
Okay, so what is compliance settings? What is compliance management? So Config Manager 2012 has this compliance settings feature that we can utilize to set baselines for devices. So it could be we're looking for, maybe like a server baseline is looking for, I want to make sure the endpoint client's there, make sure the SCOM agent's installed, things like that. I can make sure that set of devices has things I expect to be there. If they're not there, report non-compliance and resolve that. We'll talk about that later on. So the actual configuration items are the rules, the things to go look for. I'm looking for, again, is an agent there or not? Is the network card set to a gigabit or not? Things I can do things like that, evaluations based on these items I can build. So the items are the rules. The baseline is a grouping of items. A baseline could consist of one item or 1,000 items in a really obscure example, but it's customized. So we can do, again, the rule is the items. The baseline is the actual grouping of items into an actual baseline. We apply the baseline to a collection. The members of the collection evaluate the membership of the collection, evaluate compliance based on if they have the pieces we're looking for or not. If not, report non-compliance. If they have things we're looking for, report compliance, and move onward. So that's the idea behind client manager or compliance settings in Config Manager. So we can use that to assess compliance for a variety of things. Let me go back one step. So this feature was called Desired Configuration Management in 2007 product. DCM was referred to as, but again, going forward, it's all referred to as compliance settings. That is that DCM replacement set in Config Manager 2012. So very high level here. Always make sure if you're going to enable this in your environment, make sure you actually enable the compliance evaluation setting and the client agent properties on your site. So make sure you enable that. Check it from false to true. Make sure you enable that in your environment to enable the compliance management piece. At a high level, so we create a baseline. Again, a baseline could be one item or could have 1,000 items, any range of that. So we create the baseline, assign to a collection. Members of the collection assess their compliance for those items or non-compliance for those items. We can auto-remediate settings. If the setting should be a value of X, it's a value of Y. We can remediate that setting and put it back where it should be through auto-remediation. We'll talk about that later with Santos or through a demo. We can auto-remediate baseline items that are not set as they should be. We can put that back through auto-remediation. And then out of the box, we don't have any predefined baselines in Config Manager. We have to create this stuff either ourselves or import it from somewhere else. We're going to focus on the somewhere else piece during our next part of the discussion, talking about using a tool that has a bunch of predefined baselines in it. We're going to take that data, import it into Config Manager.
So now that you guys understand a little bit of our compliance setting and how that works in Configuration Manager, and one of the most important things about the compliance setting that we just said is that compliance settings doesn't come with any template at all. So it doesn't come with something predefined that we can say, all right, now I want to check for compliance. How do I start? Where do I find a resource that can help me start with the compliance in Configuration Manager? And that is the resource we're going to start talking now, which is Security Compliance Manager. So Security Compliance Manager is a solution accelerator from Microsoft. And all of you have a copy of it on your USB stick as the solution accelerator for private cloud. So make sure to take a look at that tool and installer of that tool. So this tool tool, once it gets installed into a system, we can basically start looking to a baseline. So each baseline is predefined for something called a security guidelines. So these security guidelines and security guides were some of those patterns and practices that we used to have in Microsoft that we designed, hey, you want to be in compliance, you better start looking at the patterns of practice in the documentation. And after you read all those documentations, you start saying, hey, wait a minute, how do I get in compliance with that machine again after reading all that? So after reading those documents, we said, we have this baseline that we can use and we can deploy into a system. So this will provide you with a set of predefined configuration items and predefined configuration baselines. And this, we will be able to export it from Security Compliance Manager and later on import it into our system. And that's all we're going to start talking today about this product. So what are the different deployment methods of security compliant baseline? You may say, we got this free tool from Microsoft that can go from one to many. And that means that even if it's just one machine, you can use this tool to be in compliance with that machine. So if you don't have configuration manager, you can basically use a tool called local GPO, and that will help you out, guys, to apply these policies into your system. So it's not just for configuration manager. It will help you also for your Active Directory environment, for domain joined and for non-domain joined. So this product is covering all the basics for compliance. So you will later on see on these demos that the setting has so many baselines and have different options to help different environments and different organizations. So how this integration is done? We talk about configuration manager. So we have the configuration manager in our infrastructure, and the infrastructure for configuration manager will help you out deploy these baselines into 1 or 1,000 machines in your organization. Then we grab security compliance manager on all their baselines. We start reading and we make an assessment of these baselines. We said, oh, we're going to make sure that our Windows 7 machines are in compliance. Or we're going to say, oh, but I just don't want Windows 7 machines. I may want Exchange Server to be in compliance. I want to make sure that the inboxes are in compliance. I want to make sure that all my devices in the environment are compliant for my different organization. And then we export these settings into different options, like a CAP file for configuration manager. Or like I mentioned, we could do it in the local GPO, and we later on import those. Once we get the export option in Security Compliance Manager, we're going to go into Configuration Manager today, and we're going to import these settings, and we're going to deploy them into the system. Once it's imported, we're going to deploy it, and then we're going to evaluate the rules. Because there's two options in Configuration Manager. We can monitor the baselines or the compliance, and then we can also remediate some of these compliance machines that are non-compliant. And we're going to take a look at some of those today. So some of the other filters that came on Security Compliance Manager, the first thing I must say, this version 2.5, was released this month. So the previous version, 2.0, had a specific baselines, like Windows 7 or Windows Server 2008, and we include some Windows XP Service Pack 2 and Service Pack 1 back then. But in this new release, we include some other baseline. So that means that Microsoft is committed to this product, and we'll continue on creating different baselines for each of the product later on, right? So we got Windows 7 right now, we got Windows Vista, we got some Office 2010. So each of the new product, we start creating baseline. So you better check Microsoft Download from the Security Compliance section to see whether or not we have a new baseline for the product you're trying to look and make in compliance. Now, this product doesn't just integrate with Configuration Manager and Active Directory. There is a process pack that is called IT, Governance and Risk and Compliance pack that actually integrate with Service Manager and System Center. So we get Compliance Manager to check for Configuration Manager and compliance settings to check for compliance in your organization. But you can also integrate this product with the ATRC pack with Service Manager. So let's say you have a ticket on a machine that is non-compliant. You can integrate this in Service Manager and make sure that Service Manager create a ticket and deploy this to Configuration Manager. So that will actually integrate all the flow on your Microsoft Operational Framework or ITIL later on. You can also have more expansion to other products like Active Directory. If you're using Active Directory, we got a tool called Local GPO. A Local GPO can work in two ways. Can manage to export this group policy into a local template machine. Later on, you go into Active Directory and import this at ADMX. Once it's imported into ADMX, you're going to deploy the group policy as normal. Now, this policy will be forced and enforcing this group policy into your system to make sure they are in compliance with those settings. But let's say you don't have a machine that is joined to the domain. You have a workgroup or a DMC. You can do the same. You can export this using local GPO and later on make that DMC compliant with some of the settings that you have in your organization. So what type of products do we support? We currently support all the Windows products, from Windows 7 to Windows Server, and now we have baselines for Exchange servers. We don't currently have any specific for like a product like SQL Server, but we later on may see this baseline from Microsoft.
Okay, so the install of, we'll call this SCM, Compliance Manager, we'll call it SCM, not SCCM, of course, but SCM, it's pretty straightforward. We download the binary from Microsoft, we launch it. We can install the SCM tool, you'll see here in a second. We can install that tool set on Windows Vista, Windows 7, and Server 08 or 08R2. No support at all for the tool yet on Windows 8 or Windows Server 2012. So no baselines. You can't run the SCM tool on it either. It's no support completely at this time. But again, it'll come, of course, obviously at some point. But right now, as of today, no support for Windows 8 or 2012 Server. Oh, wrong keyboard. So SCM, Compliance Manager, it uses a database to store information about baselines it maintains. So it stores in a local database. It must be local. Can't be a remote server. Can't be a remote SQL server. It must be a local database on a local box hosting the SCM tool that we'll see in a moment. Supports SQL Server 2005, 2008, and 2008 R2 as well. If SQL Server is not installed, SCM will install the SQL Server Express Edition on the computer if it's not already there. Okay? And if SQL Server is already there, it'll allow you to choose the instance to use of SQL to use for the install for the SCM purposes. Where's the deal? So we download the binary from Microsoft, run the setup exe process. We can, during this first screen, it shows we can say, do I enable this tool to automatically check for new baselines or not? If you don't want to, uncheck the box. If you do, look for new things as it launches, look for new updates to baselines. Tick the box and hit next. During the install, it's going to ask you to accept the EULA, to choose the install path, and all the typical questions it asks during a setup process. It asks those questions. The default path it installs to is shown here on the screen. So we put in our information, enable, check for updates or not, and click next. If we're using SQL on the box already, our SQL is already installed, we can choose the instance to use or create a new instance for SQL. If it's not there, we can say, look, I don't have SQL installed on this computer. I'm running this tool set on. Go ahead and download and install SQL Express on my computer. So we'll do that. It launched that install separately as part of the integrated process. So also remember, again, the database must be local. So you have to install this tool set on a server or a computer, desktop computer. It's going to require having your database local on the computer. Okay? We may be able to use remote SQL at some point in the future, but as of the 2.5 version, as of right now, it's got to be a local database. Again, that may change down the road. We'll see. The install, pretty straightforward. It launches the install of Compliance Manager itself. It launches the install of SQL Express if needed, as you see here on the screen. In the end, the process is complete, install is finished. After we install the Compliance Manager tool, it'll automatically begin downloading the baselines if we chose that option in the menu. So allow that process to continue. It'll pull down all the latest versions of all the baselines we've set or the tool establishes as part of the tool set. So we allow the process to continue. It takes 5 or 10 minutes. We can also, if we want to, go later on and check for new updates manually by going in the console, and I'll show you that here in a second, how you check for updates manually in the tool itself. Once the install's finished, we see on the left side the full list of products we support in the baseline tool, as well as the tool itself. We'll demo that here in a second. Let me go ahead and change VMs. This is 4. This is the SCM toolset, the Security Compliance Manager toolset, version 2.5. This version came out April 1st this year. This product launched, I think, April 2010, the version 1.0, April 2010. It's about 2 years old now. I get a lot of customers mention this tool set. They don't always know about this tool set. They're not familiar with this tool being out there as an option. So you guys never heard this tool before. This is your chance to go look at this and you get back to your work environments. Take a look at this tool and see if it works for your purposes. So again, version 2.5 is the latest. What we're running here in the lab or in the demo is version 2.5. Let's go ahead and go into the tool. So at a high level, this is the front page. We see the baseline here on the left side. We see the baselines we have established as part of the import process. So it has baselines for Exchange, Office versions, various versions of Windows, XP, Vista, Beyond, and Windows 7. We have various flavors of server as well. So you have baselines that built in as part of its process, the baseline processing, built in automatically download those components, those baseline components here on the box. So on the left side, we have the baselines we've established as part of the import. In the middle part, we have our working space. On the right side is the actual actions pane for the tool set. Quick, if you want to check for updates manually, you can go into File, and I'll obviously check the button to check for updates. So go out and look for any recently added or updated baselines as part of that process by doing that, manually checking for baselines there. Let's look at the tool in a little more detail. So let's look at a Windows 7 baseline for BitLocker. BitLocker is a very big topic these days, I think, for all of us. So we have a built-in baseline for BitLocker compliance for Windows 7. So we look at the baseline itself, and on the right here, or the middle here, are all the items, all the config items for that particular baseline. There's quite a few. There's 23 in this particular baseline, 23 items in this baseline that came from the Compliance Manager tool set. So we look at this tool set. Some of these are enabled, some are not enabled. What we could do here is say my security team wants to look at the list of baselines and look at that on their own terms and look at what's here I care about. I want to enable certain things, maybe delete certain items from here. They could do that in the tool. But they're saying, give me a basic list, a dump of all the things in here into a file I can look at on my own computer. What you could do is go out and say, choose a BitLocker, in this case the BitLocker compliance, and export it to Excel spreadsheet. So we go export to Excel, asking for a path. We're going to go ahead and dump out we're dumping out the baseline information into an Excel file so someone else can look at it on their own terms, look at it, and assess what's being done in the baseline. We can say save here. We'll go ahead and open up the Excel file here. So you give this file to your security team, say, look, here's what this baseline looks for. How much of stuff do you guys want to do or not do? And they can tell you, I'm going to turn off these things. I want to modify these values to these things as part of the assessment looking at this baseline. So let's see, let's look for, here's my Excel here.
So this is
oh. Where is it? Too many monitors. And just bring it back across. There we go. Okay. So here's the Excel spreadsheet. Basically, again, it's the dump of the baseline data into an Excel format that you can give to somebody else, let them look at that and evaluate this. So it has fields for all the data behind the baseline items. So we can look at this. We go across a little bit. And it gives you the baseline items themselves, descriptions about what that baseline item looks for. We can add columns to this information. We can go through and say there's more fields that aren't being shown yet in this Excel spreadsheet. We can go to customized fields. There's a whole bunch of stuff we're not showing on this view yet. So I want to also see behind it what queries are running to find that data as part of the compliance scanning check. Where's that data coming from? We can add that data to our view if you want to and choose those items in here. So we can choose, say the WQL queries are running as part of this compliance. We can choose those. Let me just do it from here. I'm going to add a couple here. Add those items to our displayed fields list. Choose the items here. And we can view information about those items in our spreadsheets. We go hit OK here and go across, and we should see more data about those particular data sets if data was there. So you can give this your security team. They say, look, these things here in the tool I want to actually enable and use. Some I don't care about. I can turn those off. So they can give that output from the Excel spreadsheet. You can look at that separately. You go ahead and minimize that. Go back to the tool. So what you can then do is take that baseline data that they gave you. So if they want to enable these, not enable these, we can go into the tool and we can modify this baseline as it is in the tool itself. So we can go into the tool. We can click. Say I want to modify the BitLocker pin to a certain number. Right now I think it's set to, by default, 7 characters. So your team wants to make that into, say, 10 characters. How would you go about doing that in the tool? So you can't modify directly baseline items in the tool. You have to go basically make a copy of those and modify the copy. So I'm going to customize settings here. Choose customize the setting by duplicating it. Ask me for a name. That name is fine for this purpose. I'm going to go hit save here and say OK. It's going to create a copy of that baseline. I can then go modify for my needs. So here's my copy up here in my custom baselines here. I can go copy. I'll look at the copy here. I can now go see, I want to modify the BitLocker pin length to something else. Say in my environment it should be 10, not 7. I can customize this stuff and and modify the copy I made of that baseline. Okay, do that process out, finish out what I want. I can also go through and say I want to delete things. And go ahead and take that. See, I don't care about some of the things that are in here. Like I don't care about this particular baseline item here. I can go and delete it. So what you don't want to have it enabled in the environment, hit delete. Delete those items from that baseline you're going to utilize. Once you're finished, we can go through. Whoops. It's like it just blew up. Nice. So what should happen is you have then the custom baseline that you can take. You can deploy that to your environment. Let's go back into the BitLocker. Let me try this one more time. So let me duplicate it again. So let's try this again. So now I have a modified baseline for this particular item here. I want to export that out to what I can import into Config Manager. I go to my right here to export. Choose SCCM DCM 2007 as the export file type, being a CAB file. I can choose that and choose where to put that CAB file. We'll talk about the import process in a moment. So we can use that process to make a copy of a baseline, apply it to our environment by doing a modified version of that if we chose to. If we want to modify what's in that baseline, we can do that by modifying the copy. Okay. Also in the tool, there's guides for different baselines that are in here. So we can go into attachments and guides, and we can see information about the particular baseline, what's in it. So we can open the security document for the Windows 7 SP1 security baseline. We can open that document. We get data behind that baseline, what's in there, why the security guide is being created for this. It's all documented here in this tool set. And it dumps out and it creates the Word document for you that's showing you all the information about that baseline, what's in it, and how it's applied to the baseline. That's all pretty well spelled out there. Let me go ahead and close that. Okay. For the demo, we're going to go out, we're going to export our Windows 7 computer security to baseline and deploy it to an actual client and watch that process as it goes in the environment.
All right. So basically, what we're going to do after that demo is we're going to take some of those baselines. I'm going to export them from out of Security Compliance Manager. We're going to export them, and then we're going to go ahead into Configuration Manager. I'm going to use this. And to do this, I'm going to go back to a demo machine that we got here, and we're going to take through a few steps here so we can do it. So basically, I have here a primary site server, where in that primary site server, I have Security Compliance Manager installed. So I'm going to go ahead here. I'm going to open Security Compliance Manager. I'm going to export two different baselines. So like Brett said, we have here in the overview, we have different compliance baseline that we have downloaded from the internet, right? Once you do a check for updates, it will synchronize for the catalog, and we'll check for new baselines. So now I'm going to go here in Windows Server Service Pack 1. I'm going to choose Windows 7 Computer Security Compliance. Once I choose this, basically we have 261 settings. Like Brett mentioned, if you don't want to have all those 261 settings, you may want to duplicate that baseline and create a new baseline for your own. Once you have duplicated that baseline, you can basically start removing some of the settings that you don't want. Once remove them, you can set delete them, delete this section. Or let's say I don't want a full group. You can select the full group and say, I want to delete the full group. So you say, all right, I want to delete group here, all right? And that's it. You're deleting basically that group. All right? So let's go back to computer security compliance. And basically, I want all these settings here, 261. There is 2 settings that I don't want, but the system will take them over from me. So if there is something that is not compatible with Configuration Manager, the system will automatically override that. So this product, like we mentioned, it works with your System Center Configuration Manager 2007 today. So if you want to use this tool with Configuration Manager 2007, you can also use it. But if you want to use it for 2012, you can use it still. So even that it says 2007, we're going to use it for 2012. So we're going to go here into SCM. I'm going to save it into SCM Lab. So I'm going to save my new baseline here. I'm going to wait a few seconds for the baseline to be saved. So if we look at the error log, there is the 2 settings that were not compatible with Configuration Manager. So he knew it was not compatible, so he take it away. I click OK, and it will bring me the folder that had my DCM rule already exported. I will do the same for another rule. To give you an example, we can actually go with Windows Server 2008 R2, Service Pack 1. We can do the member server security compliance. We can go ahead, set SCM 2007. I'm going to export that. Wait a few seconds for the export to finish. Once it exported, it also removed a few options that were not compatible with Configuration Manager. All right? So that's good. I will click OK. So at this point, we are done with our compliance setting exportation. Let's say you want to export this to another product besides Configuration Manager. You can do that. You can select Export to GPO Backup. Once you export that into a GPO backup, you will be able to reuse it with your different Active Directory. So if you want to use this product for Active Directory, you will be able to use that. Just basically export it into GPO, and later on use a tool called Local GPO. Local GPO, we will not cover this on this session. We did a session earlier to cover Local GPO, but this will be focusing Configuration Manager 2012. We will not do that. But if you guys are interested in learning more about this product, check out the earlier session. We also have Local GPO here, so you can actually install it and work with that. So now, I finished with Security Compliance Manager, so I want to close that. What I do now, I have two baselines that I just exported out of Security Compliance Manager. I want to import those two baselines into Configuration Manager 2012. How do I do that? So basically, I go into Asset and Compliant Workspace. I go into Configuration Baseline. I do right-click, it says Import Configuration Data. Once I import it, I go and search for those baselines that I just saved from the process. So I go into SCM Lab, and I select those baselines. I'm going to sort it by day modified to make it more easier. So I just have Windows Server and Windows 7 here. So I'm going to select Windows 7, click OK. I'm going to say yes. I'm going to click Next. So I'm going to import into Configuration Manager one baseline that have 17 configuration items. Remember that I mentioned that it has 261 settings. So those settings has been grouped into configuration item. So each of the items will have more than one setting. I will take a look later on about how those settings look on each of the configuration items. So while we get this imported, we will also do the import process of the server version. So I just have that imported successfully, so that means it's good. I will go ahead and do the server portion at the same time. So I will go ahead, select Windows Server 2008 R2, Service Pack 1. I will select that. I will wait a few seconds for the installation, for the import to continue. So what we just did, we import these two baselines. One that has 17 configuration items, and the other one, it has 15 configuration items. Each of those include multiple settings that have been grouped into items. I will take a look at that later. But I will let Brett continue the next presentation here, which is deploying those baselines that we just imported into Configuration Manager.
Okay, great. So we're going to actually deploy those two baselines we just built, imported from Compliance Manager into Config Manager. Let's go back to the demo. Let's go ahead and close this. So we now have the baselines we just imported from Compliance Manager. So we have the Windows 7 baseline here, and we have the Server 08 baseline here. We're not going to deploy those to a machine and watch the process of actually evaluating its criteria against that baseline and determining whether it's compliant or not based on what's inside the baseline configuration from the Compliance Manager toolset. So go to Windows 7. We're going to go ahead and, do you have a collection for Windows 7? Let's see. Just go ahead and build it real quickly, a device collection that contains Windows 7 devices. So I'm basically creating just a collection that contains only Windows 7 computers and target that with my baselines. I'm going to go ahead and quickly build this out. So we're going to add a query-based collection here. We're going to just call this the query Win 7. And we're going to choose operating system as criteria. Let's go to criteria. We're going to add a new item here to look for simple value where operating system, where the caption is equal to Windows 7 Enterprise. That's fine. So basically I'm creating a quick little collection that contains only Windows 7 boxes I can deploy my collection to. I can deploy to all, but really we should be deploying the baseline to actual machines that have things we're looking for. We shouldn't really deploy a Windows 7 baseline to a server group of collection or clients, right? We want to target and limit what we're deploying to just to minimize the number of non-compliance we get to really what we care about, not deploy a master collection or baseline to machines that may not match, have that criteria. So let's say OK. OK again. All right, so now we have a nice little Windows 7 collection we can deploy to. Refresh. Okay, so here's my one member of my Windows 7 computer here. So show members, we have one box. Now back to the collection, back to the baseline piece. So we go to our Windows 7 baseline here. We're going to right-click and deploy it to that collection. So right-click. We're going to enable the remediate non-compliant rules was supported now. We're going to enable that option here. We're going to crank this down for demo purposes only. We're going to crank down the evaluation period here to see every minute. Not a production value at all, but just for this purpose, we're going to crank that down to 1 minute. And our target collection is going to be that Windows 7 collection we just built. So device collections and Windows 7 collection here. We're going to say OK. And we're going to say OK again. So we've now taken that Windows 7 baseline we brought in from Compliance Manager into Config Manager. We're going to deploy that to a computer in this case, one computer in the collection of Windows 7 computers in our environment. Okay. We're going to jump back down to our Windows 7 client, which is here. We're going to kick off a policy check. We get policy by default every hour. We're going to tell this to go get policy now, not wait for the 1 hour to occur. We'll go ahead and kick this off by going Control Panel. Initiate machine policy retrieval now, not waiting for the 1 hour period. So we say go into Config Manager applet here, and we're going to Actions, and we're going to say machine policy retrieval. Go ahead and run that right now, and get policy from the management point. Pull down policy, which is assigning that collection, that baseline to this computer through that collection. We're going to say OK here, and OK again. Let me go back into it now. And configuration. So we now have, here's the Windows 7 compliance we just deployed to this computer. It's now available as a configuration item here in my baseline list. Right now it's showing the compliance is unknown right now, right? We need to evaluate that compliance, and is this machine compliant or not based on what's in that baseline criteria. So let's choose the item here we want to evaluate this baseline here. We're going to say evaluate. Give it a second to process that. And we should get status back in the applet saying compliant or not for that baseline. And we're not compliant for that baseline at this point. So now what do we do? We can go in the applet itself and see if you report. This will tell us where we're compliant for some things. We can actually jump to these items by clicking the item in the report here, looking at this. I'm compliant for this item here. Click that. It tells you what things we're compliant for that baseline. What we're not compliant for is obviously shown here as not compliant and critical in this case. We can look at those items and figure out this machine doesn't match those criteria based on maybe it's configuration error or whatever it is. We can assess looking, I'm not compliant for things I should be compliant for. We can take and remediate those during a later step, remediate those back to being compliant, evaluate again, we should be compliant then at that point if you go through the whole process of remediating these steps. Okay? So let me go ahead and close that. So again, we see the compliance state for all the items that's inside that baseline. Compliance state for all those items is shown here, as well as the status. All right, go ahead and close that. So how do we evaluate that on an enterprise level, though? So we look at a client level, that's great. How do we evaluate that experience, though, at an enterprise level? How many machines do I have are compliant and non-compliant based on that criteria? We'll pick that up with the actual site server side of the equation here.
Perfect. So we just deployed those two baselines, right? We validate that they were deployed to a specific collection. We can deploy these baselines to multiple locations, multiple server OS, or multiple versions of the clients, right? So what Brett does was create one collection to limit the Windows 7 results to that Windows 7 baseline that we just created. So the reason to do that is to make sure that we are applying the correct baseline to the correct server or the correct client to avoid issues of those compliant baseline on other locations. So what we do after we deploy that is we ensure that those clients are healthy, or that those clients are compliant, or those clients are non-compliant. And I want to know what happened, not just one machine, but I want to know what happened in the full organization. So there's two ways to do this in Configuration Manager. We can go through the console to the monitoring workspace, and inside the console in the monitoring workspace, there will be options for deployments. So when we look for deployments, we will be able to find out here whether or not those deployments are in compliance. So you will see compliance, and you will see exactly what options on those configuration items are in compliance. But then, after that, you can also generate a report that you can build a subscription in that report to check for compliance and non-compliant. Once you build a subscription on that report, you can get a report of their compliant machines in a weekly or monthly basis. If you want to check for non-compliance in a daily basis, let's say, I want to check how many computers our antivirus definition has been updated during the day. I can set up a configuration item and a baseline to run every 4 hours. And then at the end of the day, I can run that report to check for those compliance. Or I can get this report through the email, thanks to Configuration Manager and their new subscription thing that we have inside the system. So what we can do is, I'm going to show you how to do this on the demo machine. So we have this done here on the client side. I learned how to troubleshoot a single client, but I want to learn how to do for multiple clients. I want to learn how to do it with thousands of clients, actually. So if I go here, we see the compliance rate. But like I mentioned, we can go to the monitoring workspace, deployment, and we will see the deployment of that baseline. I will take a look here, and I will check what is the latest data. So I will run summarization for that product. I will do a refresh. And I will wait for the refresh to update. So once I did the refresh, it shows non-compliant one machine. So I want to see what machine is actually non-compliant. I can go and view status here, and it will bring that page that I saw on that you guys saw on my presentation. So if I click non-compliant, it's telling me, oh, this client is not compliant with all of these compliance settings. What do I do to identify how to fix some of those compliance settings and to ensure that my computers are in compliance? So this is where we go back to the asset and compliance, and we start looking at those configuration items. So for example, I give you one example here in the event logins. We're going to do a right click on the event logins. We're going to do properties. I want to take a look at what settings this event login is taking place. So we click here on settings, and we start seeing, oh, these are all the settings we are taking a look. So we take a look. We have a script that has been imported, what has been exported from SCN and has been imported into Configuration Manager. I want to check what this script is checking right now. All that I'm doing right now is monitoring, but we can do something called automatic remediation. So how we do that? Basically, we have to analyze that script, and to do that, we got to go into settings. We select one of the policies or one of the settings that we want to review. We check that CI, and then we click Edit Script. And here is the script we are doing. We are taking a look to modify, or we are taking a look to monitor just the system. Let's say we want to implement a remediation for that script. We can analyze that script, and whether or not it returns a true value, we can later on add a remediation script. So once we add a remediation script, we click here, we said open, and we can add a new script, a new VB script with a different remediation section. We already know how to do a monitoring of that CI, but I want to remediate that CI. So you can actually start by copying that script here, and you're going to say, oh, test script. Let me open a notepad here real quick, and I'm just going to import that script as example. So you copy that script. Whether or not return a true value, I want to remediate that. I want to actually set that value to X, Y, Z value, right? So I say that new script. And I can say, oh, this is going to be my remediate here. So once we set remediate here, we're going to save that as a BBS. All right? I'm going to save it here into my SCM lab, save it. Now, I'm going to go here into that CI. I'm going to open that. So it says remediate. And now I have a new script for remediation. So what's going to happen, it's just going to go and remediate whether or not they found that as not true. It's going to be remediated after we finish that. So that is how you remediate a script, basically, as part of a CI. But let's say a registry that I want to modify. So you can actually modify one of these registry settings into the compliance section. You can go and say, oh, whether it is equal to 1. If it's not equal to 1, please go ahead and remediate. So the rule will change from monitoring to remediation. So all we got to do is go into the remediation section. We can click remediate the rule whenever it's supported, and we will be good. Now, you see that you have multiple CIs as part of as a baseline. So you got to analyze how you're going to enable remediation in some of those spaces. So now, to do a demo of remediation, what I have done here on the lab is basically deploy a new baseline. And in this baseline, I'm checking for a setting. Let's take a look at this setting. So if I go to settings, I check for a registry value in the proxy. So what I'm checking is to making sure that those machines are in compliance, they must have a proxy value of good.contoso.com. So let's go back to the client. I want to check if actually my client is in compliance for that rule also. So we identified that we were not compliant for the Windows Server 7 Service Pack 1, and right now this is just a monitoring rule. This one is actually a monitoring rule too, but it's just for IE proxy. We can take a look, view the report like Brett showed us earlier, and here it says no compliance. The reason for the not compliant of that setting is because the current value is bad.contoso.com, and it's supposed to be good at contoso.com. So that makes that value to be a non-compliance. So I said, oh, what's going on? All I have in this rule is just monitoring for that, checking for compliance. But I actually don't want to spend time troubleshooting those machines that are not compliant. I may want to enable a remediation on that process. So let's take a look. So we go here, back to the deployment. Right? So I have here this deployment done. So I'm going to click Properties on that deployment. So if I open that deployment, I have an option that says Remediate Non-Compliant when supported. That will transfer that rule that I have from a monitoring rule to a remediation rule. So I got to make sure I do that. I remediate whenever it's possible. I also go back to my CI properties here. I go into the setting. I open that registry value. Once I open that registry value, I go into the compliance rule. Modify again this setting, but now I'm going to include a remediation whenever it's supported. So if I do that, and I click OK, so my revision for this CI will change from 2 to 3, which it just did that. Now my baseline, I want to keep track of what I do with my baseline. So if you don't modify anything inside the baseline, the revision will remain as 2. But I want to keep track of what I'm doing. So I'm going to replace here. I'm going to check the deployment. Now this deployment is actually a monitoring deployment. Let's take a look at what we did earlier. So if we did here, we go Properties. We go Deployment. This is Windows 7. Actually, it's Remediate right now. So we uncheck the remediation. If we uncheck that, the action is monitored, right? So we got two types of rules. We got monitoring rules in the compliance space, and then we have remediation rules in the compliance space. Now let's go back to my client. I did those modifications in the client. So now I'm going to refresh my client. I'm going to download the policy to ensure that we got a new policy here. I'm going to go into the configuration. I'm going to click refresh. The revision is still number 2. So what I'm going to do is go back to configuration manager, and I will put a comment into my baseline so I can keep track of it. So I will do a properties here. I will say, oh, this actually is going to be revision 3. All right? I'm going to click apply, and this will change the revision of that baseline. So now I go back to my client. I do the same process. I wait, I enforce the policy again, and then I start refreshing here. So I see whenever it's go and change to version 3. Yeah. So I'm changing the user policy. Okay? It's going to wait a few seconds here. All right, so now just change for version 3. And what happened? Automatically, once it gets evaluated, it's just changed to compliant. So let's see, oh, now my machine is compliant. So if I go back to the compliant and say, oh, your machine is definitely compliant, you don't have any problems. So if I go to my Internet Explorer, let's see what happens in the setting that is changed. Oh, now I have a good proxy. Instead of the bad proxy.contoso.com that I had before, now I have good.contoso.com. So now my machine is compliant. So we take this knowledge about remediation back to configuration manager and the security compliance manager. So we should take all those settings that we want to remediate, that we want to make sure that my machine is in compliance inside my system, and we should change those CIs, right? And in Brett's demo, we also noticed something. We create one collection to limit just to those Windows 7. But inside of each CI, if we know that that CI is specific to a product, we can go into the CI, into the support platforms, and we can change that. So we know that that internet proxy that we did is a global setting. So I don't need to put a supported platform in that case. But in the case of the baseline that we just imported, we know that it's only going to apply to Windows 7 Service Pack 1. So you may wonder, what will happen if I deploy this to a Windows Server box? So basically, what is going to happen is going to set non-detected or no rule process. So it will say, oh, not found, setting not found in the system because it's not compatible with the baseline we're doing. So if you want to make sure that those CIs only will run in terms of the script and modifications to the Windows 7 Service Pack 1, we got to go into supported platforms. I'm going to select that value here. So we check here, major version 6, minor version 1, build 7601. So this is now limited to Windows 7 Service Pack 1, all right? So if you want to limit it, you want to bring that over back to some other settings, you may want to change it down, right? So each of these CIs, Security Compliance Manager has been ensured that it's just going to work on that supported platform. So when you do the deployment of the baseline, if you deploy it to something else, it will basically not work. It will just work on those Windows 7 machines. Right? Right. So any questions, anything like that that you guys may have so far? We'll go back to our demo machine here. So if you guys have questions, let's start making some lines and start asking some questions here, and we can go over back to our product. Any questions, anybody?
Go ahead and show the collection creation, the non-compliant collection. Go ahead and show that.
Right.
Too.
So other thing like Brett is asking me right now.
Mouse.
I have a mouse here.
Hang on.
Do it again. Okay. So we are here into the primary site. So Brett is asking me, hey, what happens if I want to create a non-compliance collection to ensure that those machines are not compliant? So we can go here, we can set deployments, we can grab the machine here, and now we got a ribbon on top that says create new collection, and this was brought in Configuration Manager 2007 R3, where you can create collections for compliance and non-compliance. So I'm going to create a collection for non-compliance. So we said that we have our rule here. So we can take a look at that rule, and he said, oh, if it's not compliance to this baseline and the ID, please create that collection. So I'm going to click next here, click close, and then if I go back to my device collection, I just have a new collection here. I just wait and refresh this collection. And that will bring me that computer that is not compliant. Just wait a couple minutes here. Right. Let me update the membership too. Right? So we go here, membership rules. We got the non-compliant rule that is not limited or anything like that. So if I go here, show query language, these are all the compliance state here. Collection ID, that's the collection limiting that we have. All right. So let's give it here a few seconds. All right. So I have a question here. That's good. So what question do we have?
Yeah, this is primarily around SCM itself. So
Right.
Since you can do updates on the baselines from Microsoft, let's just say you've duplicated a baseline and you've edited it, you deleted some stuff, you've made your changes. You do an update and they've updated that baseline that you've already duplicated. How do you remediate kind of the differences that might have come through that update?
Right, that's a good question, and it will be a good example also to show. So here I have two baselines. I have a 1.0, and then I have a beta version here. So we got something here, compare to merge. So what we're going to do is we're going to compare two baselines. We can select this one, all right, and then we can actually select another one, all right? So let's do this. Let's select this one and then put the beta one. So compare. I'm going to compare to the release one. Click OK. and it has 37 in common, and then we have 10 that are not common. That means from the beta 1 and the version release, we got 10 differences. So you can compare and merge those, and you will learn exactly what actually changed. Once you do that, if your decision is actually to merge them, you can actually merge those into one only setting. Say, all right, after I'm done, I compare. I want actually to merge those. Okay? So you can actually merge those different here. Let's merge.
Right there.
Yeah, that's
Compare
right.
merge, yeah.
Right, in this case, they are the same, so I'm gonna do different, compare, merge. All right, so right now I will merge those two into one only setting because are different baseline here. So you can compare them if it's the same one. If it's not the same one, you can actually merge some of those settings. All right, so question back there?
Yeah, I had a question about when you first created that first baseline, you had selected the button to remediate, but then that, of course, didn't actually turn on remediation. You had to go into each configuration item and turn it on. So what is that turning on remediation at the baseline? What is that relationship? Is that just an easy way to turn it off and on?
So here into the system, let's go back to that baseline. So you can do two things. There's something called global remediation whenever it's possible and whenever it's supported, and that is here into the deployment. So if we grab this one, we'll change the rule, like I mentioned, from monitoring into remediation. And I haven't changed any of the other settings to enable remediation. But I can try to make sure that if it's not there and you can support the remediation. So for example, registries. So all the registries, you will be supported to modify the setting right away. But the scripted ones, you will not be able to remediate them right away because you actually have to develop a new method to go ahead and create a new script. So if you go here, and instead of monitoring, all you want is that baseline to be remediation. You click here and edit, and it says remediation non-compliant rule when supported. And then each of the rules, the only rules that will be applicable to support the remediation will be those that are not scripted. So for example, registry values, those will be remediated without coming here and selecting remediating non-compliant when supported.
Okay, so even though it's unchecked there, it really is going to remediate.
Right. So if you want a specific setting that you say, oh, even if it's monitoring, if this setting is identified and I want to make sure it's remediated, you go into each of the settings and you said, all right, enable that one, even if I'm doing some monitoring here. So it's monitoring and automatic remediation. Right?
When you created a configuration item using a script, you put the script actually into the GUI in the tool. Do you need to do that, or is there a way to preserve the script as an external file?
So these scripts that are imported, let me grab one script. So all these scripts are documented into the guide, how you're going to do that script. But if you want that script, you can actually edit. And if you want to do it outside of the box, you can take it from here, and you will have it. But the default monitoring script, do you have seen it in a folder? I haven't seen it in a folder, to be honest with you. I haven't seen it in a specific folder. So if you want to preserve this script and do a modification, you can do what I did. Just copy it, save it, and then just do the modifications. And instead of remediation, you can say this will be a monitoring script. Let's say you want to add a log file, which is a simple thing. You can say, oh, I'm going to start doing a log file or the monitoring to save it somewhere. If I read, hey, this value was not true, so then I can modify this and say, all right, so instead of a remediation script, all I want to do is change this script into a monitoring one. So I can paste that, save it, and instead of remediation, I will say, oh, this will be my monitor CI2, for example. You save that as a BBS. All right? So what you will do is basically click here, open, and monitor your CI2, and that will do it. So if you want to do, like I mentioned, add a remediation script, you will be able to do that here. And those remediation scripts, you will be able to preserve them because you will create them. But we don't have anything specific to preserve the ones that are by default in the CI.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, no problem. Question there?
So it looks to me as though none of this depends on the SCCM client, as though you can monitor and remediate even where the SCCM client is absent or unhealthy. Is that correct?
Do you mean the estimate tool? this security compliance manager.
Yes.
So this demo and this session was specific with configuration manager, but it's not. This security compliance manager, it works with anything. So like I mentioned earlier, right? If we go back to the product, security compliance manager here, let's say I want to modify this Windows 7 computer security that have been working during the day. So there's different export options here. We got SCAP to export this definition, and then we have GPO backup. So if we have GPO backup, we can export the GPO backup, right? And I have here my GPO backup exported. And basically, you remember what is security configuration wizard for every machine that is local? So basically, using that, we'll be able to import this INI file that we have here, right? So you don't have to do all this manually if you don't want to. We have something called the local GPO, and then local GPO, it has something called the local PAG. So we install local GPO to give you an example, and that will actually help you deploy this baseline outside of Configuration Manager. You can actually go into a non-domain joiner machine, like in your DMC, install local GPO if you want, and then you can export that. Other thing that we didn't talk here is like with SCM, you can take a gold machine. Let's say a machine that you have to take dedication. You have to input some security and compliance there. You're ensuring that it's totally compliant. You can use the local GPO to export that machine into a group policy or into a configuration manager. And then you will have one rule from that gold image to deploy to a many machines. So we'll convert that compliance from one machine to many. And you will be able to do it without having the local GPO. In that case, you will have something called the GPO pack, which is in a script that only you double click it, and it says, oh, this GPO pack has been updating the local group policy on those machines. So you don't really need configuration manager.
If you don't have it, yeah, you can use it through pure AD GPO and not even touch config manager at all.
Or use it on Active Directory. You import it into AD and you use
reporting, monitoring through config manager. If you have that, if you don't have it, then yeah, you do it through just deployment through AD.
All right. So any other question that you guys may have here? We still have time to answer some more questions.
So you created a collection from the result of a baseline?
That's correct.
What would you use that for? Remediating those machines, or?
So two things. I can know why that machine was not in compliant, and let's say I want a remote control to that machine, or I want to deploy a software to that machine to make it in compliant. Like, I create a compliant rule for a machine that doesn't have antivirus, for example, that doesn't have the latest antivirus installed, and I want to know what machine it is. So in that one, you will not be able to run a script to do it, or you may be not able to have a registry to modify that. So I create a collection in that case to do a deployment to those machines.
So you'd advertise that script, the fix-it script, to that collection. Whoever shows up in the collection membership, based on the automatically running of the updated collections, they would get that new the new package to go fix whatever's broken on the machine. It's a way of auto-building a deployment list based on query-based collections, evaluating constantly, figure out who's non-compliant for that thing. You could use that to target those devices through the collection.
And I can also as well...
Another way of remediating devices, basically.
And I can create a collection, too, for the compliant ones.
Yeah, exactly.
Just to make sure they are compliant, I can create a collection for those compliance, too. Or I can say, oh, I want to create a collection for those that fail, that were not able to even roll the rules. I can create a collection for error, and those, there's no remediation you can do on those that throw error. You may simply have to go and troubleshoot, making sure that the client is healthy, making sure that it's connecting well to a system. So in those that are throwing error, you're going to want to make sure, hey, what actually happened here?
Let's say your baseline looks for is endpoint there or not there. If it's not there, have a query built that goes and finds, in a collection finds those things, devices don't have endpoint installed, and then have an advertisement standing up that's already built, that's out, that says if the targeted that collection, go deploy endpoint on those machines based on being a part of that collection membership. That's how that could be used.
Right. Any other question? So if you guys don't have any questions, so here is our email address. We got more questions there. Our email address and our blog site. If you want to take a look, you might take a look.
As with System Center Update Publisher, there are third parties that provide input. Is there anything for security compliance for third parties?
Not that I've seen, but we can ask the product managers and see if that's something they're going to have in the future. Right now, I think it's just Microsoft products, right? Yeah. But if we can see what's coming down the road, we get with us up front. I'll give you my email address. I can get back with you offline and figure out if that's something we're going to add later or not. At this point, not that we know of.
Yeah, or you can start breaking some of your custom baselines. Let's say you want to start checking for your own thing. So you may be able to do it. Or the gold machine can be a solution. Build a machine that has those settings that you want to check for. Once you build that machine, you can capture it. Say, hey, export these settings from this machine, and then you will be able to support other products. Let's say you're checking for Adobe, to give you an example, that maybe don't have the icon installed in one location. You want to disable that. You can maybe be able to do it. So there's ways that you will be able, using the security compliance tool, like the local GPO export, to get that done. All right? So don't forget to fill some of the evals for our section today. We love feedback and we love to hear from you. Also, we will be at the PFE booth in the expo hall during this afternoon, answering some of the questions from Security Compliance Manager and the System Center Configuration Manager. Also, I'm one of the authors of the Mastering System Center Configuration Manager book, so feel free to ask me about the book. We have there a couple of the cards about the book. The book is going to be published in the next 2 weeks, so you should be able to learn more about compliance setting on that book. And if you're going to have more questions, feel free to go to us and ask us any questions. All right? Thank you very much, and don't forget to follow the